All right, back now on the news desk with you, and today we're joined by Brian Riley, Director of National Taxpayers Union Free Trade Initiative, now to discuss Congress's effort to end the U.S.-Canada trade emergency. Now, the economic impact of the Trump-era tariffs and what rising costs now mean for American consumers in the agricultural sector. Brian, welcome to the news desk. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
You got it. Okay, so for people who aren't following this very closely, what exactly is and was the national emergency declaration underlying these tariffs, and how did it become the basis for imposing duties on Canadian goods?
Well, that's a very simple question. The answer is a little bit complicated, but the most straightforward version is President Trump issued an executive order saying that we have an emergency resulting from illicit drugs crossing the northern border. And the way to address that was through imposing emergency tariffs. So that order has been in place since roughly last March. And Congress just voted this last week. The House voted for the first
Mm-hmm.
time about actually wanted decided to terminate that emergency, which would get rid of those tariffs. And the tariffs were very high, but there was an exception for goods that qualify under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. So it wasn't like a lot of these statements. It sounds really draconian, and then the tariffs that are implemented aren't quite as bad as were threatened in the first place. But after the tariffs were imposed, our tariff on Canada increased from less than 1% to about 3.2%. Well, that doesn't sound very high. It's still a big increase, and it's certainly created a lot of ill will and reduced exports from the U.S. to Canada as a result.
Yeah, you mentioned the House recently passed a bipartisan resolution to overturn this declaration. How significant is that vote, even though it might lack a veto proof majority?
Well, it's certainly symbolic. So we have these votes going on at the same time. The Supreme Court is considering these so-called IEPA tariffs,
Mm-hmm.
whether they are legal and constitutional or not. So these votes may or may not indirectly influence the Supreme Court's decision. Last year, the Senate voted twice on a similar resolution and passed that resolution twice. So what's likely to happen is this resolution is going to move to the Senate. If history is any guide, the Senate's going to pass it. And then President Trump will veto it. And there's not, at least as it currently stands, not there aren't enough votes to overturn a veto. So it's really more symbolic than anything. But there was the almost 100% Democratic support for getting rid of the tariffs. And I'm old enough to remember when a lot of Democratic representatives did not vote that way and were more supportive of tariffs. And there were six Republicans that signed on. So that's significant. I think a lot of the Republicans who have supported Trump's tariff policies privately would tell you that they're concerned about the tariffs, both in terms of their impact on our economy and in terms of
Mm-hmm.
the electoral impact when they face midterm elections. But most of them are still lining up behind President Trump's policies, which I think is unfortunate for our economy. These are taxes on Americans, and I think it's bad for President Trump too. I think one of the best things that could happen to us economically is to get rid of these tariffs. Our economy would grow even more. President Trump would look even better as a result.
Yeah. So we mentioned that the House passed that bipartisan resolution. I mean, these attitudes toward the Presidential Tariff Authority, what do you think that says going forward?
Well, the polls of Americans show most Americans don't like the tariffs. Now, there's an
Hmm.
exception. A lot of Republicans, according to polls, like the tariffs, but I suspect they don't like the tariffs as much as they support President Trump, and are just going to line up in support for whatever policies that he advances. I think most people who follow politics, and my background's more economics than politics, but I'm sitting here in Washington, D.C., and most people will probably tell you that the reason President Trump is president today is largely because Americans were concerned about inflation, concerned about high prices and the cost of living. And these tariffs, they haven't really come through in terms of cause. causing a big increase in general inflation, but they've certainly driven up the cost of certain goods. And if that last presidential election is any guide, if cost of living is still in front of mind for voters, the current incumbents could pay a price during the midterm elections. And then if we do have a change in who the Speaker of the House is, those kinds of things could really have a lot of impact on how the last 2 years of President Trump's terms may fall out. But it's really a unique situation where I can go home to the Midwest where I'm from, and everybody's asked me about tariffs, where, until well, probably until his first term, most people probably didn't even know what a tariff was and had more important things to worry about. But now people know,
Hmm.
whether you're a manufacturer who needs to get imported parts or imported aluminum or steel, or a farmer trying to decide what to plant, and you got to pay more for fertilizer, more for your farm implements, and reduce access to foreign markets. There's just a lot of uncertainty right now, and that if you're in business, uncertainty is really a killer.
What does this do to our relationship with our friends to the north?
It's terrible. You look at many economists would say, well, one of the risks of tariffs is that other countries will retaliate. We put tariffs on them, they will retaliate. Their governments will put tariffs on us. Um, that hasn't happened as much as some people had predicted, but what has happened, even without those official government actions, people in other countries, people in Canada decide, "Well, we don't want to buy your whiskey and bourbon from the United States. We don't want to visit Florida. We don't want to visit Hawaii. We don't want to do business in border towns." And those are all factors that have been reflected in reduced business between the two countries, and our exports. Since these tariffs were put in place by President Trump, our exports to Canada specifically have gone down by about 20%. So we put tariffs on other countries, we may import less, but that leaves them with fewer dollars to export our goods. And it's the kind of thing that, in response to your question, it's you can't just change, like, we can get rid of these tariffs by passing a bill or a Supreme Court saying they're not constitutional or they violate the law. But the bad feelings that can result between the U.S. and people in other countries, those are really long-term concerns. And these are our close friends and close allies, and I think we should be trying to strengthen those ties, and we're doing the opposite. It could cost us in the long run. It's an own goal, as one of my friends described it yesterday,
Hmm.
and there's no reason for it.
Brian, in your view, should Congress reform the IEEPA or place clearer limits on unilateral tariff actions by presidents?
One of the best things Congress could do is simply say, look, the Constitution, Article 1, Section A of the Constitution says Congress has authority over international commerce. Commerce has authority over duties and taxation. So we're taking that authority back, specifically, and not President Trump, but any president in the future, if you want to impose new tariffs, which are just taxes on imports that are paid by Americans, you can try and do that, but you've got to give us a chance to vote on it and approve those tariffs before they go into effect. That's really what the role of Congress is supposed to be. Now, the challenge is, if Congress passes a bill like that, what president is going to sign into law a bill that's going to reduce their authority? So some people have speculated, well, maybe they pass a bill and say this wouldn't go into effect for another 2 years or another 3 years,
Hmm.
where the future president would have to deal with it. So, and this is something, by the way, that's had bipartisan support. The Speaker of the House of Representatives and a lot of Republicans had lined up in the past to reclaim this authority, but they have not signed on, by and large, to advance that kind of legislation in the current Trump administration, with a few exceptions. But it's mainly been Democrats, for whether they've become big free traders or they just are opposed to President Trump, and because of the divide in Congress, those bills have gone nowhere so far.
Yeah. Okay, as we look ahead, what's the single most important takeaway you want Americans to remember about the U.S. Canada trade relationship, and what's at stake if these emergency tariffs remain in place?
Well, although these were imposed for alleged illicit drug trade, and there's the amount of drug flows that go across our northern border are insignificant, less than 1%. Some people who follow the statistics say there's more drugs going from the U.S. to Canada than vice versa. But the other thing that President Trump has relied on is the trade deficit, which he says is a national emergency, which is also another justification for tariffs. But all a trade deficit is results from us choosing to buy goods from other countries. It doesn't mean we have a trade deficit with Canada. It doesn't mean we owe Canada any dollars. It just means we're choosing to buy their oil or we're choosing to buy their aluminum, and we buy more from them than they buy from us. Doesn't mean we owe them any dollars. And largely, our trade deficit is a result of the U.S. being a destination for foreign investment. And maybe other countries don't want to buy our goods as much because they want to buy shares of Apple instead or help finance our ridiculously huge federal budget deficit. Those dollars come in and they benefit us one way or the other. So the key with the U.S.-Canada relationship going forward is how can we try and get the government out of the way and move back to that reciprocal zero tariff trade that really, since
Hmm.
President Reagan through NAFTA, through USMCA, has been really the bedrock of our trading relationship.
Are we pushing Canada into the arms of China?
Um, Absolutely. More broadly, all of our trading partners are looking at alternatives to the United States. They got to have export markets somewhere, and if they can't rely on us, they're going to look to other countries. Nobody wants to look to China for obvious reasons. But if they can't rely on us, there's the other large market in existence. The European Union just cut a trade deal with India. They're cutting trade deals with Latin America. So a lot of the rest of the world is moving forward with trade deals. The Trump administration is negotiating trade deals, but they aren't the zero tariff reciprocal trade deals that we've had in the past. They're not the reciprocal trade deals that President Trump promised. They leave very high
Hmm.
tariffs on other countries. They announced one yesterday with Taiwan, for example, but it leaves a 15% tariff on our imports from Taiwan. So even if Taiwan's tariffs go down, we have very high tariffs. It means they can't sell as much to us. It means they don't have as many dollars they can earn to buy our goods. So these agreements are leaving high taxes on Americans, but they're also reducing our export opportunities. That's going to leave us a little bit on the sidelines as other countries move towards these mutually beneficial economic alliances. And once we lose some of these markets, it's hard to get them back when we lose those relationships, whether you're exporting wheat or manufactured goods or anything else. And a lot of the things that we import as well, um, we think of consumer goods, but a lot of them are goods that we need to produce things here in the United States. So it's I think very concerning in the long run if we keep going down this path. The rest of the world will move ahead, and that's going to benefit countries like China, and it's going to make things worse for the United States. We ought to be trying to build our relations with our allies for obvious reasons.
Brian, we've seen recent polling that President Trump's numbers, his favorability numbers, are falling. They're at an all time low for his first and second term. He's already backtracked on some of his DHS claims in Minnesota. He's not looking favorable here with the tariffs right now. Do you see this playing out differently as the midterms are coming? That we could be taking a different stance on at least Canada and Mexico tariffs wise, and if so, how soon does it affect the pocketbooks of our of Americans?
Well, I hope that's the case. There's just been announcements just in the last 48 hours or so that the administration is thinking about rolling back some of the tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. So if you work in an aluminum factory or as you produce steel, that you're probably not too happy about that. Most Americans don't work in steel factories. Most Americans work at companies that either rely on steel to make other manufactured goods, to build houses, to build our infrastructure, to provide the goods that we need for energy exploration and transportation. So getting rid of some of those tariffs will certainly be a plus, but it'll take a while for that to really flow through to the final prices that Americans see. One of the challenges with tariffs, as opposed to a lot of other taxes, it's really a hidden tax. So if you go
Hmm.
buy something, it's a store, you put a new steel fence up in your backyard. Sometimes they'll have, here's the tariff cost broken out, but a lot of times they don't. So you might know something costs more, but you don't necessarily know that it's because of imports. The areas that we've really, everybody in the administration touts as successes, for example, low gas prices. It's no coincidence that President Trump exempted imported petroleum and imported motor fuel from tariffs. I think there should be a lesson there that by keeping tariffs low, giving people the freedom to decide how to spend their dollars. That's not just the best economic path forward, but it's probably an economic winner as well. It's almost on a product by product kind of basis. Some products you won't see a big impact. Others where we've seen high tariffs, it will become more clear. The people that will benefit the most, I think, are those small businesses who are getting hit by higher import costs. And getting rid of those tariffs will allow them to remain in business and pass those savings along to their customers as well.
Okay. Brian Riley, Director of the National Taxpayers Union Free Trade Initiative. Thank you so much for the insight. We sure appreciate your time today.
Thank you. I appreciate your time. Thanks for having me on.
You bet now. All right, 48 past the hour. We'll take a break. We're right back here with more news next.